part. Today's Investments in Our Planet panel session is part of the Reducing Your Carbon Footprint series, co-hosted by 6 different Ann Arbor church organizations. I'm Stephen Modell, and I'm your host. But we have an announcement from Don Levitt. Don, take it away.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I just want to extend a welcome as well. This is an interfaith initiative, and I just want to name the congregations who are involved because they're all involved and they've all contributed. In alphabetical order: Beth Israel Congregation, Blue Ocean Church, First Presbyterian Church, First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, St. Clare's Episcopal Church, St. Francis of Assisi Parish, Temple Beth Emeth, and Zion Lutheran Church. We needed all these congregations to put together these webinars. We needed their networks, their expertise, and their marketing, and we could not have done it. Any of us couldn't have done it alone. So we started out with a Climate Hero Stories initiative, where each congregation selected a person to be a climate hero, and we featured those in the Ann Arbor Observer over the course of a number of months. And webinars, and as Stephen noted, this is the last of, I think, 7 monthly webinars, just a tremendous amount of work. On May 7th, we had the first annual A2 Climate Teach-In with Mayor Christopher Taylor as our kickoff speaker and Professor Shelley Miller as our closing speaker. And we had 21 tables of local climate action organizations. So I just want to extend a thank you to the congregations, to all the volunteers, to all of the webinar hosts, and for this evening, a thank you to Stephen Modell and his team. So welcome to you all, and on behalf of the 8
You got muted, Don.
Was I muted through that whole thing?
No, just in the end, on behalf
just
of
in the
all
end.
the congregation.
I was going to say I spoke beautifully, but perhaps I thought I was muted.
Just at the very end, Don.
Just at the very end.
You're good.
Okay, good. Now back to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Don. It really shows a remarkable set of efforts. Now, previous talks in the series have touched on electric vehicles, solar energy systems, and most recently, individual behavior choices and changes you can make. Oftentimes, the conversation drifts at some point to whether a given practice is not just ecologically sustainable, but also financially sustainable. And that prompts today's session. We will cover environmentally conscious investment options from a variety of angles. Today's sessions and speakers in order are Praveen Mahendran with the Michigan Climate Venture. His talk will be Michigan Climate Venture, Intersecting Climate Tech and Venture Capital. Praveen is an MBA MS Sustainability candidate at the University of Michigan Herb Institute for Global Sustainable Enterprise. He has 8 years of experience in sales and marketing analytics, including 2 years in energy. Praveen is the Director of Investment Management at the Michigan Climate Venture. Then we'll have Gigi Norcross with Green Century Funds. Her talk is Greening Your Investments. Gigi is Vice President of Business Development for Green Century Funds. Based in Chicago, she concentrates on growing Green Century's investors in Midwestern and Southeastern states. For 10 years, she was a leader in the National Citizen Outreach Team for the Fund for the Public Interest, a nonprofit organization that runs campaigns for the country's leading environmental and public interest organizations. She will be followed by Mark Grossman, who works at 350 Silicon Valley and is a very active member of Congregation Beth Am. His talk is Aligning Financial Values with Religious Values. Mark works, as I said, for 350 Silicon Valley, an organization devoted to the rapid transition away from fossil fuels. A member of the Congregation Beth Am Finance Committee and speaker for the National Dayenu Climate Action Movement, Mark has had an impact on his temple's investing practices. and then beyond. And finally, there's me, Stephen Modell. I'm with the University of Michigan School of Public Health and the Guyano Climate Circle of Ann Arbor. My talk is Investing for the Planet with Variety, a title that's intentionally left to be ambiguous. I'm a Research and Dissemination Activities Director in the Department of Epidemiology at the School of Public Health and Vice Chair of the American Public Health Association Action Board. I've engaged in environmentally friendly investing for the last 15 years. Though a person's environmental concerns may be aligned with the organization they're working at, which is the case with several of our speakers, the interest in preserving the environment starts in one's heart. And you will see this in the various presentations today. Agenda-wise, we will take 1 to 2 questions after the first and then the second presentation, then fully open up for questions after the last 2 presentations. My thanks to everybody attending. So Praveen, it is your screen.
Sounds good. I will start sharing my screen. Sorry, 1 second here. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So sorry, start at the right at the ends. Go to the beginning instead. Thanks, Stephen. Like you said before, I'm Praveen Mahendran. I am a director of investment management at the Michigan Climate Venture. And I'll go a bit more into what that is in a minute, but we're going to go through what MCV is, how we approach investing, and then what we've learned over the past year or two, because we are a very new fund in terms of all through the lens of impact investing. So to start off, who are we? What do we do? So we founded 2 years ago, so very new funds. MCV is essentially a student-run fund that is really more a kind of a hybrid fund/educational program within the University of Michigan. It goes across the entire graduate program, so business school, environmental school, law school, any graduate student can apply to be part of the fund. And we really focus mainly on the Great Lakes region, focusing on areas of rapid decarbonization. And the idea is that we get to get hands-on experience within the field of climate technology, while also, providing real value to companies as we do so. And we are funded primarily through the University of Michigan endowment, although we are seeking external investments probably in the next year or 2. So the fund itself is comprised of about 30 students, although this fluctuates year by year. That includes people from SEAS, School for Environment and Sustainability, Ross School of Business, Ford Engineering, Law, and the idea is that we have a wide variety of disciplines that allows us to draw from different ranges of expertise. The only requirement for coming to MCV is to be interested in climate technology. You don't need to have a background in banking, don't need to have a background in investing or finance or whatever. It's really more about the interest and the drive than it is about the ability. As we found, folks who are interested are much more valuable sometimes than those who are very qualified for the role. And this is the team. So there are 7 of us on leadership. Myself and Josh run operations. Ian and Co run education. Val and Angelo, who typically would be presenting this presentation, but today they're not here, so here I am. Do external relations, and Drosti does cultural recruiting. And we are also sponsored or guided by a faculty advisor named Gautam Cole. He is a professor within Ross and SEAS, and actually before Michigan Climate Venture, he founded another fund called the Social Venture Fund, which focuses on healthcare, climate, and education as well. But this was another one he decided to go for because we wanted to more focus on climate. There was also much more demand for that within the student body. And right now, again, we're only 2 years old. We're basically the way that we're organized to make 1 or 2 or maybe sometimes 3 investments per year. So far we've done 1 per year. Last year we invested in Rejoule. They are an EV diagnostic platform based out of California, and that's been pretty great so far. And the new one, we have agreed as a fund to invest in. We have the fund set aside, but there are just some legal things we got to work around before we can officially announce who they are. But it is a great investment, and we are excited to announce that as soon as we can. So our approach is we focus primarily in Great Lakes region, focusing on mobility, food and ag, and materials / circular economy. And the reason for this is we find the Great Lakes area, one, there's Michigan, so it makes sense for location, but also a lot of investment goes towards the Boston, New York, SF, and that's great, but there's a lot of untapped potential within the Great Lakes region. There's a giant economy in the Great Lakes that maybe everyone here knows about, but a lot of the country does not know about. So we want to make sure that we're giving those companies the chance to get the funding that they want. And we focus on these three verticals specifically because of their relevance to the region as well. So mobility, of course, Detroit, having that nearby is huge. So that gives us a very clear connection to the area. Food and agriculture, being in the Midwest, that's again very clear line to the region itself. And then materials circular economy, less connected to the region, but more so an area that we define as an area that needs decarbonization and tends to get less investment than it deserves. And the way that this fund is set up is that we are a patient capital evergreen fund, and we are focusing on pre-seed and seed stage companies. The reason why is mainly because we don't have a lot of money, so we have to target companies that are willing to take a bit less money than conventional Series A, Series B investments. So, and then digging kind of more into the, how does it relate to investing within climate change? How does it relate to investing for impact? So we look at both the environmental and social aspects of investments when we look at them. So within environmental considerations, we look at decarbonization potential, and we look at the social cost of carbon. So what does that mean by decarbonization potential? In broad terms, it means quantifying the potential for a solution to reduce greenhouse emissions while considering how well can we measure that potential right there, right? So thinking like at the level of the industry, like how much can fertilizer reduce greenhouse gas emissions? How much can using electric how much can optimizing electric batteries reduce emissions? How does something like rejoule, which doesn't directly reduce emissions but it enables the EV economy, how might that down the road enable reduction in carbon emissions? And the value proposition here for the company, beyond the good in philanthropy, is that it puts it in a position where if it really does have a high potential for decarbonization, it also means that there's a long-term demand for this service and for the product or service that's out there. The other thing we started looking at this semester, or rather this year, which we did not the year before, is consider the social cost of carbon. I think someone before mentioned that Shelley Miller was on this panel last year. So she and two graduate students collaborated together to create a methodology to measure the social cost of carbon. So thinking not in terms of just pure CO2 equivalent tons removed or emitted or whatever, but more so like what is the impact on communities, what's the impact globally, and put that into a quantifiable number. Unfortunately, I am not the biggest expert on how this methodology works, but we use this basically as another line item when we do evaluate companies. Basically, like we look at their financial projections. Okay, they're going to earn, 10 million this year, 11 million next year, X million next year. Great. What does that number look like minus the cost of carbon, or plus if they're providing value in that sense? So we're trying to make sure that we're taking into account in a very real way, what is the value of this company to society and monetary sense. And then, as much as we do care about the environmental side of things, this is the Michigan Climate Venture after all, we also care about how this impacts people, right? So when we look at investment, we look at what is the chance that this investment will help people or hurt people. So this can include health. So, will it reduce the amount of fly ash coming from coal plants? Will this create jobs for folks in the area? How does it affect social equality? How does this affect social mobility? And unlike decarbonization potential, unlike social cost of carbon, this is much harder to quantify. So it tends to be more of a qualitative look at the space. And the idea for a company, you know, why they care is that this can help them mitigate their PR risk and increase their value proposition to the communities, to investors, to kind of a broader range of stakeholders than just we're going to increase our profits, so to speak. And then finally, we look at DEI and hiring. So we want to make sure a lot of these companies are going to are technology, STEM-focused companies, and as many of us know, there's a lot of folks that are kind of emitted from or kind of have a tough time getting into those fields. So we want to make sure that where a company can help, and they can't always help, is the big thing to consider here too, that they're making the efforts that they can realistically make to ensure that they are proactively finding talent that is not just within the conventional demographics of technology, of climate, so on and so forth. And the one thing to consider with this is that with very early stage companies, they're often, you know, a couple of people from a lab in a university or friends who came together and they started to start a company, right? Unfortunately, they may want to, you know, build out a very diverse team in the future, but we can't expect someone that's just starting off to have one in the current. So we got to kind of balance, you know, what should they be versus what can they be in the moment. And then we also look at, you know, are they planning to recruit like this way in the future? Are they reaching out to channels such as recruiting through historically black universities or women's groups or that kind of thing? We had one that we looked at, which they couldn't really hire more people than they already had, but they were engaging with female engineers like in college and high school. So thinking what they can do beyond kind of like, okay, we have our CFO is you know, of a underrepresented group. So there's a lot of things you can do with this, and a lot of ways we look at that aspect of a company. And just one thing to touch on here too is that I mentioned before that most of us do not come from a finance background. Some of us do, some of us don't. And so to make sure that we are all kind of caught up to those ideas, we do have a very rigorous education process. As you saw before, we have 2 directors of education, and the idea is that they can teach us about the technology, like at a broad scale. You know, what's the science out there, what's the technology, and what's going to make impacts. Then we look at how do we quantify the impact through decarbonization, social impacts of carbon, and then they get into the more conventional like market sizing, accounting, financial modeling, that sort of thing. So that's how we that's how we can empower folks who are typically not from conventional backgrounds for finance to enter this space. And then finally, I'd like to get to what we've learned over the past couple of years. And keep in mind that I've only been in the fund for a year. None of us are seasoned investors, so take all with a big grain of salt. We're, you know, this is just kind of what we learned from what we've seen and what we've heard from other investors, but by no means are we a Sequoia, you know, shedding valuable insights that are, you know, groundbreaking. So again, we also want to consider that we're looking at this through a lens of how do you find companies that are sustainable, right? So when trying to find investments that are sustainable, we found that looking at universities accelerators are a really good way to go, especially in the Great Lakes where there's not a ton of databases out there, right? So if we go to San Francisco, New York, Boston, there's a lot of communities and groups that are already there, already established. You can find a database and say, oh, great, Y Combinator has these companies. We go and look at their list and see what makes sense for us. Out here, you have to be a bit more creative with your sourcing. Not that there are not good companies out here, it's more that you have to look a bit harder for them because they're a bit more spread out and there's not quite a centralized location as there is on the coasts. Another thing is to consider is leaning on internal experts. We are very lucky to have some very strong experts in certain areas of climate tech investing, especially agriculture, energy, and material science. So having them in the room gives us 2 things. One, when we're looking for companies, they know what's out there already, so they can say, okay, great, let's go for fertilizer optimization. Let's avoid carbon credits. Let's target this issue within fashion that's a bit more, that's been tough to tackle, and this company's really good, has a really good solution for that issue. right? So finding those companies out there is great, but also when we find a company, it looked great on paper. Now we're going to take it to due diligence. We're going to look behind the veil and see, like, what's there. Like, are they, financially viable? Is their management team great? Is their product good? Are they really delivering on their promise for being sustainable? Having an expert can really allow us to pick at parts of the company that we wouldn't know as lay people, right? Knowing that, okay, this piece of IP is indefensible, or that this robot looks great on paper, but it can't really operate within the field the way that the founders claim it can operate. And then finally, when considering decarbonization, we need to consider, I think we should start with the industry itself. And then look at both kind of top-down industry and then bottom up the solution, right? So top-down thinking, like, all right, what are the big areas that can really use decarbonization? So everyone knows the utilities, electricity, the grid, but, like, what is the potential of fertilizer? What's the potential of circular economy through fashion? What's the potential of concrete, right? From a top-down point of view, what is the potential of that if they was to follow a full decarbonization path? At the same time, considering what is this company specifically doing, and how can that individually affect that within the realm of this broader idea? And the way we try to tackle this is through real rigorous internal research, which is really thesis development. So what we do is have folks who have been in the fund for a year, who've kind of gotten their feet wet with the kind of the mundane task of sourcing and due diligence, all stuff like that, to dig into an area like batteries and say, like, all right, what is the space that we should be looking at within the space of batteries? And then when looking at impact evaluation, the way we approach this is that we want to make sure that we're considering impact on the same level as financial upside, multiples, the proficiency of the management team, the market available for this product, right? This is not just an add-on, like, oh, great, and they have an ESG like twist. This is like, okay, these 5 things are great, from the conventional thesis point of view, but if their impact is so minimal that it doesn't do much for the environment, it says, like, okay, it's a great investment on paper, it'll get us great returns, but there's no impact there, we're going to forego that investment, right? Another thing we consider, and maybe again, Shelley Miller is a great resource for this as well, and she may have gone to this in prior sessions, is we need to go beyond conventional impact assessment. So not considering just like, okay, does this spew CO2 into the atmosphere when the tractor goes off? Like, we consider the embedded carbon. So how much carbon was required to build this unit? How much carbon was required to maintain and transport the hardware? Going to like every facet of the product, which is a problem because we only have about a couple months to do due diligence. So we got to be very intelligent in the way we approach this. So considering, like, not doing a full boil of the ocean, like, we're going to look at every nut and bolt on this device and see whether it's going to be carbon positive or negative, but thinking, all right, here is the solution, here's the conventional alternative, how does that line up against the other one, right? Third one is, like I said before, consider social cost of carbon within financial evaluation. So we make sure that we add a line item when we do financial evaluation to say, like, all right, here is the projected revenue going forward, and then if we were to subtract the carbon damage this might do, is it still truly a valuable company? And then finally, considering the philanthropic aspirations of the company against economic realities. So companies want to do a lot of good things. Like, a lot of these founders really are really trying to do some great things. They're trying to bring decarbonization solutions, not just to where they are now, but like globally. They're trying to do some really great things in terms of empowering workers and farmers and so on and so forth. But we got to think about, okay, great, you have this product that's going to, in theory, change the world, but you have this other product on the other side that's making a lot of money, where other investors may be more inclined to push you towards. So in reality, are you going to, create this product that's going to solve cover cropping, or in reality, are you going to go with the company with a product that's going to sell to Bayer for tens of millions of dollars? So that's the consideration we should have there. And with that, I would wrap up.
Thank you, Praveen. We'll take one question, and I'll look for a raised hand. Praveen, I'm curious, since it is Michigan. Oh, Don, you have a question. Please go ahead.
Well, Praveen, thank you. I know you're investing a modest amount of money in these companies. Sometimes investors have some engagement with the company in some way after they've invested, perhaps people who are investing more money. Do you have any engagement with the companies that you are investing in?
Yes. So what we do is after we engage with the company, we work with them. So we continue to work with them. The real value that we provide to companies is not the money, because it is very little money. It's more so the ability to provide consulting services is really where value comes from. So for example, for Mutual, we did a project with them to show how they can ultimately price their products that they can sell it to. So they work with auto shops to basically diagnose batteries for Teslas and so on and so forth. And we created a pricing plan for them to ultimately target these companies while making it generous profit, so that they could grow the company. And that's what we'll do with other companies as well. So really our model is not so much the money itself, but more so the value from the students who have, a varied backgrounds that can contribute in that in a big way.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stephen, you're muted.
Thank you, Praveen and Don. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Gigi Norcross. Gigi, take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Gigi Norcross, and I join you from Green Century Funds. When Stephen did his introduction of me, he described having worked for 10 years for an organization called the Fund for Public Interest Research. A couple of notes about that. The Fund for Public Interest Research runs fundraising and field campaign operations for a range of different environmental and public health organizations, including PERGM. Some of you may be familiar with the Public Interest Research Group in Michigan. I spent the 10 years that Stephen referenced. That was my first 10 years out of college. And what I did was run canvases for these organizations. And I was based in Chicago, and I oversaw offices all around the Midwest, including the Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo, and Lansing offices. And a thing about Michigan schools is that they get out really early. And the summer is a big time for these, because these organizations employ college students as summer canvassers for their field campaigns. And my job was to grow the offices. And that's very difficult to do when everybody that's going to work for you in the summer starts on one day. So my formative years of organizing and fundraising, very much my experiences in Michigan and Ann Arbor in particular, sort of, paved the way to my doing this work long term. I did not continue to do that, but I did a couple of decades of fundraising for different not-for-profit organizations and political campaigns. 4 years ago, I made the decision to move to Green Century Capital Management, which was a bit of a leap for me because I did not have a background in financial services. I had a background in environmental organizing and fundraising and all of that. But I started to feel increasingly urgent and anxious about climate change and wanted to devote. I've always tried to align my work life with what I'm worried about and what I care about in the world life, and just felt that I needed to put more of my time and my energy towards something that could impact the increasingly growing problem of climate change more quickly. And I felt that an investment strategy that incorporates the things that we're talking about today was the way that I could best do that. So I joined the Green Century Capital Management team, and I've been at trying to figure my way around mutual funds, and hopefully I can share some information about our investment strategy and how we make an impact that will contribute to the conversation today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and as I get rolling here, one thing that I want to know is if people here are already familiar with Green Century and its funds. So maybe just throw into the chat if you are already familiar with Green Century's fossil fuel-free mutual funds, and or maybe are already invested. And so then I can get a sense of that sort of as we go, and you can throw that into the chat so I'll see it. Okay, so Green Century was established in 1991. So we've been in the space of sustainable investing for more than 30 years. So a bit of a theme in recent time is that there are more and more firms out there that sort of identify themselves as green funds or ESG funds, and the flows of money coming into those kinds of funds has increased dramatically in the last couple of years. Green Century is not new to this space. We've been in this space for, as I say, more than 30 years. And we think about our impact in 3 ways. The first is in the investment strategy itself. We're one of the first families of fossil fuel-free funds that are environmentally friendly and diversified. And I'm going to run through our methodology in a second. The second part of our impact is in shareholder advocacy. So Don, a few minutes ago, you asked about how do you engage. I'll have a lot on that in a few minutes. We've got an in-house team of advocates that analyze our holdings and look for opportunities for companies that meet a certain bar with respect to being environmentally friendly, and then work to get those companies to do just a bit better. And then the third part of our impact story is around our ownership structure. So we are one of the only, if not the only, United States mutual fund company that is wholly owned by nonprofit organizations. So I mentioned Pergem as one of my first employers. Pergem is one of Green Century's owners. And we talk about that in our story because it's another way that an investment to Green Century can generate impact on issues that you care about. When 100% of our profits, we are structured as a business, and when 100% of our profits flow to organizations that are also generating impact around public and environmental health issues, that means just even more impact on things that you care about. So that's the 3-part strategy. The investment strategy itself, shareholder advocacy, which we try to do in a very robust way, and an ownership structure that is unique. All right, so getting a little bit then into the investment strategy itself. There are several layers to what we do. The first part, the top of the pyramid here, are value-based screens. So there are a set of industries that are screened out of Green Century funds altogether. And so those include civilian firearms and military weapons, tobacco, GMOs, nuclear energy, or nuclear weapons. One of our funds also screens out factory farms. So we've got 3 funds, and they're in the green box here at the bottom of the screen. The Balance Fund also screens out factory farms. So that's the first part of the pyramid. We screen out industries altogether. The next part is ESG criteria. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance factors. These are factors that can, when a company scores well on ESG criteria, that helps to mitigate risk in your portfolio. Companies that are in Green Century's mutual funds have to meet a certain ESG rating in order to be included in the fund. So that's the next part of the pyramid. And then the bottom part of the pyramid, which is really underlying the whole thing, it is that our mutual funds are fully divested from fossil fuels. And we have a rigorous definition for what that means, which is, you can find it anywhere on our website. You can find it in our prospectus. And that is explore for, extract, process, refine, and transmit coal, oil, or gas, burn fossil fuels to make electricity, or possess carbon reserves. And I spend a minute to really detail that out because we're fully committed to being fully divested from fossil fuels. We eliminated the last of our, small holdings in oil and gas in 2014. And then we make that very clear to our investors. So the definition of what fossil fuel free means to us, it is not just a tagline, and it's not buried anywhere. You can find it in our prospectus. And so that is a key differentiator for Green Century's investment strategy. I think to this crowd, I probably don't need to spend a lot of time talking about the moral imperative to divest from fossil fuels. Aligning your money with your values and concerns, it is the right thing to do, and it is the right thing to do for a whole lot of reasons. And it seems in this particular setting, I don't need to spend a whole lot of time making that case. We do, however, spend a fair amount of time still making the case that there are strong financial reasons also to divest from fossil fuels. So there's the moral case, which is clear. The financial case is also arguably just as clear. So what we're looking at here is a chart that tracks performance over a 10-year period of time with this is, a fund that excludes fossil fuels against a fund that doesn't. And as you can see, the blue line outperforms, and in some years very considerably, the orange or yellow, however that looks, on your screen line. Sometimes people will say that from a fiduciary point of view, investing in this way, it doesn't make sense, but that's really a myth. You can divest from fossil fuels and show positive returns as this chart indicates. So that's the investment strategy. We'll pivot a little bit then to the second part of our approach, and that is in shareholder advocacy. We think of the investment strategy as a way to make sure that you are not invested in things that you find morally and environmentally objectionable. Where impact really comes into play is in shareholder advocacy, so engaging companies to get them to change their business practices in a way that's better for the environment. Our shareholder advocacy season, it tends to run on a summer to summer time period because general meetings, shareholder meetings are happening right around this time of year. So the numbers that are in this slide are from the last fully completed shareholder advocacy season. In that season, we engaged 80 companies, secured 20 company policy victories, and some of those policy wins were with some name brand companies, including Apple, which people may remember from a year or so ago, that Apple finally made some manual type material available to people to help them fix their own phones. A growing environmental problem is how much electronic waste is ending up in our landfills. And some of that is because makers of products like our phones haven't made it particularly easy for you to repair your phone. And instead you go off and you buy a new one. We, in coordination, collaboration with a number of other entities, took Apple on this point, and a result of that was that they have started to make user manuals that include repair information in them. We have several key issue areas that we focus on in our shareholder advocacy work. Our priority campaigns are deforestation and biodiversity, plastics, and climate. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about each of those. So on biodiversity, last year, Green Century won a 70% vote at Costco. So by vote, I mean that we filed a resolution as a mutual fund company. We can file a resolution on behalf of our investors to compel a company to address an issue. So we filed a resolution at Costco to encourage them to set reduction targets for across its full supply chain for Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. They've now agreed to do that, to develop a plan to reduce emissions from their supply chains, and that all by itself will go a long way towards reducing pollution that's going into our environment and protecting habitats and biodiversity. Plastics, the main company that I'm going to highlight here is Coca-Cola. So we own Coca-Cola in our equity fund. We have filed several shareholder resolutions with Coca-Cola over the course of our plastics campaign, which has become more and more of a priority for us. And two key changes from Coca-Cola have come from that. The first is that Coca-Cola agreed to reduce its use of virgin plastic or new plastic by 3 million metric tons by the year 2025. That is a big number. And so if you're like me, you're thinking, I don't really know how to wrap my head around what 3 million metric tons is. To put it in equivalent, you can visualize it terms. It is the equivalent of taking 200,000 plastic bottles out of the waste stream every minute for a year. So that's a big deal. The second one is that Coca-Cola announced that they would do a whole lot more, particularly in the United States, to distribute its products in refillable or reusable containers. So the specific thing that they agreed to was that 25% of its beverage portfolio would be distributed in refillable or reusable containers by the year 2030. So that is also a big deal, and is kind of the way that we approach shareholder advocacy is we have name brand companies that have a big footprint in our portfolio. They all meet a certain threshold, and that's how they get in the fund in the first place. But Coca-Cola obviously isn't perfect. They're generally considered to be one of the worst plastic polluters in the world. And so we can use our position as a shareholder to compel meaningful change that is hugely impactful. And then the third piece of our impact story is around ownership. So we're wholly owned by environmental and public health nonprofit organizations, a full network of groups, although a smaller number of them actually own Green Century. And then as I mentioned in the outset, that's unique. Most mutual fund companies are not owned by nonprofit organizations that are also trying to deliver impact around environmental and public health issues. What's represented in the screen here is the Colorado Public Interest Research Group, which is another one of our owners, celebrating a win of their own, which was that they passed a producer responsibility law, which will require companies to pay for their products' packaging. And then the revenue that's coming from that, so this was put into place now a year ago or so. The revenue that comes from that will help to expand curbside recycling programs all around the state. So the combination of our approach, the investment strategy itself, the shareholder advocacy and how we can compel companies to make changes that are significant, and then ownership structure are all part of how we aim to deliver impact. There are a few resources that I'll share here. We produce and just updated and just released a guide on fossil fuel free and sustainable investing. It's called The Future Can Be Bright. It is can be found on our website at some point over the course of this session. I'll share a link in the chat. We co-wrote this with Green America, which is another place that I would list as a resource, which is a publication that has a wealth of information. So this guide is one that's widely available through either our site or theirs. USSIF, the Forum for Sustainable and Responsible Investment, is a good resource for this kind of investing, so that you can see more firms beyond just Green Century. And then I mentioned a couple of other organizations that are, again, dedicated to the space of sustainable and responsible investing. First Affirmative, Financial Network, Natural Investments, and then Green Money Journal is another publication that people might find to be helpful if you are looking for more resources on sustainable and responsible investing. And then I have to share this. Sorry. And that takes me to the end of my my presentation. I really do appreciate the level of participation here. The fact that you all have done 7 webinars and we're, the last one, and we still have such a good crowd. It is just terrific. So I appreciate the fact that I was invited to participate.
Thank you so much, Gigi, for that very thorough and absorbing presentation. We'll take one question from the audience. So speak up if you have a question.
I have a question. So while you were talking toward the end there, I went into my financial investment company and just Googled Green Century Fund. And, yes, there's several different of your funds that are available through them. There's a balanced fund, individual investor, an equity fund, individual investor, et cetera, et cetera. There's there's 6 of them in here. So what, I guess, is there one that, what's the difference?
Yeah, okay. There are 3 mutual funds. We have 3 mutual funds. Each of those mutual funds has an individual share class and an institutional share class. For the most part, if you are an individual that is doing investing on your own, then you would likely use the individual share class, and the minimums for participation are quite low. At $2,500 for a regular account and $1,000 for a retirement account. if you are using a financial advisor whom you are directing to, align more of your money with your environmental concerns and values, then your financial advisor, it may be able to invest on your behalf in an institutional share class. The minimums for that are $250,000. So for the most part, Green Century's investors come about half from people like yourselves just making an investment directly. And then the other half comes to us via an intermediary. So it just kind of depends on what you're doing, on which share class. Then between the funds, the balanced fund is 60% stocks and 40% fixed income or thereabouts. And people tend to gravitate towards a balanced fund if you are wanting to have some portion of your investment in the fixed income space, because it is a little less susceptible to the market ups and downs of a full equity position. And then within the fixed income portion of the balanced fund, about 60% of it, a little more than 60%, is held in what's called green bonds. And so those are bonds that are issued by various entities specifically for sustainability purposes. So as an example, one of the bonds, green bonds, that's in the fixed income portion of our balance fund is a bond that was issued by Starbucks, the proceeds of which are going specifically to teaching farmers how to grow coffee more sustainably, and things like that. So that's why you might want to use the balance fund. The other two funds are index funds. And so what that means is that they start with an underlying index, and then our criteria is applied to arrive at then our funds. And they're 100% equity, so all stocks. One of them is domestic, so that's the equity fund. And then the other one is the international equity fund. So the companies that are held in that fund are outside of the United States, 23 developed markets outside of the United States. And there's some really cool holdings in there. So as you might imagine, there are alternative energy things outside of the United States that are doing really good work. And there's a number of those kinds of companies that are held in that portfolio. That was kind of a long answer. So I hope that covered the things that you were hoping for.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. Thank you, Kathy. Great repartee on that. All right, Mark Grossman.
Hi, everybody. I'm out here in California. By the way, I have more hats than my introduction would lead you to believe. My day job is a computer chip designer. So that's my what I actually do for most of the day. But I'm happy to talk about this stuff too. And I just have to mention one thing, which is the idea of a carbon footprint actually comes from BP, British Petroleum. They did a bit of a marketing campaign to convince us individuals that it's our responsibility to solely, be the levers of sustainability. The oil companies have nothing to do with it at all. I thought that was an interesting fact. Anyway, so I'm here to talk about investing in our planet, aligning investments with your values, which, if you're part of a congregation, I expect you'd like to do. So that's the theme that kind of got my congregation, Beth in California, to over the finish line to, well, it's never finished, but to start moving our money to better investments. So took a long time, really. So I started being interested in climate action back in 2012 after Bill McKibben's Do the Math tour. He's the founder of 350.org, which is the main climate grassroots organization around the world. And I'm part of 350 Silicon Valley. And then because of my interest in the financial side of things, I've helped local campuses and religious groups and so forth to move their money. So Stanford got coal out of their endowment as a result, partly of what we did, along with a bunch of students and faculty. And then 2014, also, I joined the finance committee of my congregation, which I thought would be a way to kind of start dropping hints about, well, first be able to look at the investments that we had in the money that we held, as well as see what could be improved. So that let me analyze the holdings, talk to the fund managers, and present data that helped facilitate some changes. So and along with the kind of the financial part, I along with some other congregants started doing sessions about climate and the environment and relating them to Bible passages, starting with Genesis, where God gives basically the earth to Adam and Eve and said, "Here, take care of it." And instead of, it's not just dominion over everybody, it's really making sure that it's the planet, that the earth is taken care of, just for starters. And when we did that, we got names of interested congregants who helped us grow our kind of green team, and also found people who could kind of carry the message around. We did have one member of the clergy who was also supportive. So finally, after 6 years, the finance committee, we got the board of directors to approve a change in the investment guidance. And so this is what the final investment policy statement ended up being. And the real addition, most of that was already there, but the environmental part was what we got added. And that allowed the financial managers to pick greener funds. And generally, yeah, like Gigi said, you don't really have to give up returns, and in fact, you can reduce your risk, and you can actually, they replaced one fund and got lower fees, which was pretty nice. And then, so just a couple of years ago, this Dayenu Circle thing came up with, which is the Jewish climate organization, and that really got a lot of other members excited about sustainability. And so now there's people working on replacing the fossil gas appliances, and we're putting solar carports in, and it's a whole big deal now at our congregation. So that's really good. So some of this, so I guess I've been asked okay, how did I do it? And I mean, it wasn't just me, but I kind of was the most, annoying person to help push things along. So really, you have to start finding times to mention sustainability in all conversations you have with clergy, other members, and just kind of raise the awareness, even subliminally. Talk about it. during services, as you know, part of the the community led part of the service. I can make an impact. Start a green team, as I mentioned, and then it did help that I kind of had, I do investing for myself, and so I kind of knew how to do screens of mutual funds and ETFs and so forth, to look for alternatives. And there's sites like fossilfreefunds.org that are an amazing source of rankings of carbon content of mutual funds. And then and the last thing we've done, along with Tainu, was have webinars, kind of like this one, where we helped individuals move their money, do green investing. A lot of them are, not super sophisticated. Some are sophisticated. So we did 3 or 4 sessions around that. And yeah, like I said, it took 6 years to really start moving the needle. So if you're starting from kind of zero with your with your group, then it could take a while. So this is just a few little slides of the materials that we presented. We focused on banking, which a lot of individuals were interested in. And most of the big banks are, not only heavily invested in fossil fuels, but expanding their involvement despite their climate neutral targets, like 2045 or 2050. So what we advise, with the appropriate disclaimers that we are not giving investment advice, that credit unions are good and socially responsible banks. Most people qualify to join a credit union. There's millions and millions of members. They're insured. They have free ATMs. They're perfectly fine alternative. And some of these are local to California, but yeah, they're all over the place. And then for banking, well, how do you find a responsible bank? There's certifications of various kinds. There's websites that help you do screens and find a bank that's near you that you might want to move your money to. And then the other little piece of advice, well, what about your brokerage account? Is that some people use that as their bank. Well, it's kind of a mixed bag there. Even though the brokerage themselves may not be bad, right? They don't lend money to pipelines or anything like that, but they may be tied to banks that do. For example, Wells Fargo Advisors, obviously tied to Wells Fargo Bank. Merrill Lynch is tied to B of A. E-Trade is now part of Morgan Stanley. But I did, since I have some E-Trade money, I did check, and they do not commingle their funds. It's just, well, how do you feel about kind of being, part of that company, supporting it in some way? And then the ones that don't seem to be tied that way are listed there, like Schwab and Ameritrade. So that's kind of the kind of stuff we that can help congregants, with their carbon footprint. So that's about it.
Thank you, Mark. These last 2 talks will be back to back. And so I'll pull up mine and then we'll go into questions. And the title of mine is Investing for the Planet with Variety. Okay. 1 second. Okay. And any suggestions about miniaturizing the box? The viewer's box. Kathy?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
I think it looks just fine the way that it is, Stephen.
You
Well,
push the little
There we
screen
go.
button
Okay,
next
I'm
to the
good.
slider.
Okay, I couldn't arrow it, but I'm going to go up and down. So my history is that I started investing in climate and environmentally conscious investments in 2007. And my earliest attempt was during the Bush administration. You recall that he was touting ethanol from corn. So I invested in the Andersons, and unfortunately, the share value was plummeting. It was a great idea, but I had to remove myself within half a year. But 2 years later, I began to divest from petroleum, and by that I mean extraction of petroleum. So I had a number of stocks like BP and Shell that I removed. And then there was a period of time, and then moving forward since 2016, I've attempted to make about 3 relatively eco-friendly investments per year. A little bit of a lull during COVID. So what I'm going to do is present some various categories that I'm invested in and specifics underneath those. One of them I call the associate energy category. Gigi touched on this. So it's not energy production, but it's things like transport of materials that create energy. And this is one of the halfway solutions that the large banks landed on when they began to realize that petroleum stocks
uh-oh,
would
Stephen,
be declining and in less demand. One of these is Kinder Morgan. Yes.
You froze up.
Can you hear? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it's a slow laptop. My apologies. So I was talking about the fact that among the things that Kinder Morgan moves is CO2. Originally, they had been moving this through pipes for oil recovery, but increasingly it's being used for carbon sequestration efforts. Historically, this company was strong shareholder-wise, but since I reinvested in it in 2022, it's been down 9.3%. The lesson to me is that a company like Kinder Morgan is sort of a patching kind of a solution to the problem of petroleum. It's a short-term measure. And profits in a category that was on a decline will be shared by the company. And that's been happening with this example. Now, I'm going to move into what I call hybrid energy companies, and then afterwards I'll get into renewable energy companies. So these are companies that are going in an ecological direction, but haven't fully made the leap. One of these is NRG Energy. Its headquarters are in Houston, but it serves 24 states and even has action in Canada, and it's involved in retail electricity, including natural gas, unfortunately oil, nuclear, which is a source of energy that's under debate from an environmental point of view, wind and distributed solar energy. And this company was one of the ones that you heard about on TV about 2 years back when there was a deep freeze in the country and Texas was affected. So there were power outages that originated with this company. It hasn't been good with extreme weather. And its stock for me has been down 16% since my purchase in 2020. Lesson 1 for me is that poorly managed hybrid energy companies also perform poorly. And lesson 2 is where future thinking is lacking and profit seems to be the prime motive behind the company. Performance also suffers. There are two other hybrid energy companies. One of them is called NextEra Energy. It's the world's largest generator of renewable energy from wind and sun. And it also owns plants that are powered by natural gas, nuclear energy, and oil. And then we have DT Energy, which is based in Detroit. And there are many positive things you could say about it. You see solar panels all throughout Ann Arbor. And it's trying to make progress, but it's sort of measured progress. So the stock value for these two companies has actually been up 62.8% for NextEra Energy and 27% for DTE over the last 3 years. The lesson to me is that well-managed hybrid energy companies do perform well. Now we come to the purely renewable energy category, which comes a little bit closer to what Gigi was talking about. Take, for example, Avangrid. This is the third largest renewable energy company in the US with electricity, natural gas, onshore wind, offshore wind, and solar energy. And its impact is on 24 states. It's also involved in the establishment of energy transmission networks and grids throughout these states. It's actually down 25.4% since I purchased it in 2021. Now, and its yield is up at 4.4%, which some companies do to compensate for performance that's perhaps not optimal. Now, it stands in contrast to First Trust Global Wind Energy, ETF. So to be included in this fund, a company has to be involved in the manufacture of parts for wind devices or the management of wind farms, the transmission of energy from them. Now, the beautiful thing is that since I purchased this ETF 2 years ago, it's been up 33.9%. So this is sort of a study in contrast. One of the lessons to me is that pure renewable energy has to work harder to perform. And one of the factors is that there are limitations on networks and transmission. And I understand, Gigi, that what you're doing is helping to sift out those companies which are overcoming hardships and doing well. The second lesson to me is that combination renewable energy funds, things like index funds and ETFs, can succeed very handily. Now we come into batteries and assortment of batteries. One company here is Enphase, and it's headquartered in California. It develops and manufactures solar micro inverters, battery energy storage, and EV charging stations. And it's been up 22.2% since I purchased it in 2020. This company, Lithium Americas Corporation, doesn't produce batteries, but what they mine goes into batteries. And it's up 0.6% since 2021. And the performance outlook actually is quite positive for the short and midterm for it. This third company, Plug Power, is a little bit different. It's engaged in the development of hydrogen fuel cell systems and allows the system to recharge in a matter of minutes as opposed to several hours. Boy, that would be great for vehicles, wouldn't it? Unfortunately, this company is down 39.1% since I purchased it in 2022. So here are the lessons in this category. Lesson one, battery technology and lithium appear to be the wave of the future and a profitable wave. Lesson two, exotic technologies such as ethanol and hydrogen power may be good technically, but they need field testing on the market to assess whether they will perform through time. In this category, we have companies like Tesla and Ford that produce automobiles, increasingly hybrid automobiles and all electric automobiles, as well as batteries and battery plants. Ford Motor Company has just created a lithium iron phosphate battery plant in Michigan, and it's seeding similar plants throughout the Midwest. Tesla is also into solar panels and solar roof tiles. So these two companies, my stocks with them are up. With Tesla, my stocks are up 340% since I repurchased in 2020. With Ford, my stock shares are up 90% since I purchased in 2009. Here's another company, EVgo. It's a U.S. electric vehicle, DC fast charging station network servicing 34 states. It is down 30% since I purchased it in 2022. And I will note that a private equity that I own, which is centered on infrastructure, and this is a result of Biden's changes, it just began to pick up this year. So lesson one in this category, car companies producing hybrid and all-electric vehicles and that also produce batteries can do quite well. Lesson two, climate-friendly car manufacturers can beat the performance outlook assigned to them. Ford and Tesla actually have performance outlooks. They're negative and they continue to beat those outlooks. Lesson three, charging station investments and infrastructure funds need time testing because these systems are not fully together yet, at least in our country. Now we move into my last investment category, which is water. These two companies, Essential Utilities and American Water Works, are concerned with water purification to produce clean drinking water, as well as wastewater treatment. The first one is up 173% since I purchased it in 2009. The second one is up 144% since I purchased it in 2016. Here are two more companies. One of them is called Xylem. That's like the little tubes that run through plants. It offers water industrial pumps and application solutions that reduce the cost of water life cycles. It's up 51%. Another company that I do not own is called Ecolab, and it helps public and private organizations to treat water for drinking use and for use in food, healthcare, hospitality, safety, and industry. It's the world's 10th biggest desalination company. And as it turns out, Bill Gates owns a quarter of this company's shares. And its outlook is up in the short, mid, and long term. Lesson one in this category, water and wastewater purification companies in general are profitable, very profitable. Lesson two, desalination for corporate use is profitable, but this would have to be distinguished from citywide water desalination, which is an entirely different topic. My overall lessons for the investments that I've been engaged in. Lesson one, eco-friendly investing can show positive performance. Lesson two, companies that tread middle ground between classical, that is natural gas, cars, and batteries, and forward-looking, that is solar energy and water purification investment, are likely to succeed. Number three, purely climate-oriented companies can succeed when pooling investments such as ETFs and the mutual and index funds that Gigi talked about. Lesson four, exotic technologies like ethanol and hydrogen are risky and need actual market testing and time to assess their performance. And finally, lesson five, transitional technologies like charging stations depend financially on preliminary buildup of their infrastructure. So everything that I've been talking about is individual investments that you can scrutinize, consider, and possibly invest in some that appeal to you. Okay, so now we're open for questions to all four panelists, and that includes the last two panelists who haven't answered Q&A yet. Please, everybody, questions. Okay. How many of you are doing individual investing and interested in perhaps doing a little bit of okay, I have that question, but I'm going to let Tim go first. Tim, go ahead. And Kathy, can you thank you so much. Tim?
Yeah, it's something I dropped into chat that I can ask verbally is don't do a lot of investment in companies on my own, but I do have a 401k, which is where most of my investment occurs. So, but that's usually attached to the company I work for, their management board decisions in terms of the options provided. So I guess for the panel or for all the speakers, do we have any good ideas on how to engage and get that? You know, it would be great to have Century on there or Century Green on there as well, or something like that. I don't think that's currently an option. I reviewed it. I don't review it that often, but I don't think I've ever seen any like sustainability fund specifically available. But that means if it's a big corporation that we work for, how do we move the needle on getting better options for investing?
So I can take this. I work at Microsoft and talk about patience. I've been trying to work with them for about 6 years to try and add green funds to the 401k plan, and that would mean like billions of dollars potentially moving to greener pastures. But there are some resources, like if you go to investyourvalues.org, which is a product of As You Sow. They have some tools for like advocating for changes to your company's 401k plan.
I also just put into the chat a link to a piece that we did on this exact topic. So you can, it's in PDF form. So if you click the link, then you can download that. Though I was also going to mention As You Sow's publication because it's really good.
Thank you. Other questions?
To find that, did you say SUOs? What was that again?
As
You Sow. Yeah.
Oh, got it. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? I have one for Gigi. I saw like your 10th slide, and you mentioned a number of companies that you've interacted with and influenced. And there was JP Morgan, which is just a huge bank. It would seem like it has a tremendous amount of inertia. Is it possible to make any suggestions that are listened to by a bank of that size?
So we have not been successful in convincing JP Morgan Chase to even come to the table with respect to financing anything with respect to fossil fuels. But we have gotten them, we have made some progress on deforestation. So the example is that we filed a shareholder resolution to improve deforestation efforts across banking and investment portfolios. We withdrew our resolution with JP Morgan Chase after the company agreed to expand policies on forest risk commodities and forest management for clients in mining and infrastructure sectors. And the company became the first US bank to adopt comprehensive new policies to limit deforestation. And deforestation, as probably everybody knows here, it is a significant contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. So to answer your question in the big picture, yes, we can make progress, but it's in steps. So while we have not made any progress at all at JP Morgan Chase with respect to fossil fuel, we have on other issues, and deforestation is the most significant example.
Excellent, excellent. Praveen, your slides mentioned the automobile industry. I think you used the word mobilization. What are the areas that you look into under that heading?
Yeah, so we looked primarily into charging. I mean, really heavily into charging infrastructure and batteries. Right now, we can't do much to influence GM or Ford, and they're already on a good path. But I think the majority of investments that we found and looked at deeply have been in exactly in that, in batteries, in distributed energy utilities. So kind of finding companies that are trying to expand the reach of charging facilities, and also one actually kind of a little bit different company we found was one that looked into capturing emissions, but I think primarily it's been in the infrastructure, because I think right now that's kind of the biggest bottleneck that people are finding to proliferate EVs.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very practical and also forward-looking at the same time. Speaking of time, I appreciate all of you who have been here and given your attention. These are actually very, very important issues at this point, and for us individually and collectively. And my sincere thanks to all the panelists. Kathy, you get the last word.
Yeah, Greta, did you have a really quick question, or you're muted?
I just have a real quick comment. I'm from Berrien County. I live over on Lake Michigan near St. Joseph, and I don't like to invest. I don't want to invest, but I have some money that I do invest. So I have someone do it for me at Huntington Bank, and I came on tonight to get some ideas about what I can tell or ask them to do with my money. So thank you. This was helpful, very helpful.
Great. Well, thank you for that feedback.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a special thank you again to the speakers tonight. You guys were all fantastic. I'm gonna be posting your slide presentations on a shared folder, along with a recording of tonight's webinar that everybody who registered for tonight will get a link to. And I just wanted to throw one quick thing into the chat. This is the website for the teach-in that we talked about earlier, but it also has a whole lot of different resources on it locally. Organizations you can work with, events coming up with other Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County based groups, etc. So if you haven't been on that website yet, it's a great one to visit. So I think that's it. Stephen, thank you so very much for hosting tonight. You guys all did a really great job, and thank you everybody for attending. Have a great night.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Everybody, bye-bye.
Well, some people are still hanging around. Anyway, great job. I thought it was a really good webinar. Oh wait,
Thank you.